Okay. I'm assuming and hoping that everybody can hear me and it's all started okay. My name's Katie. I'm from Swindon Museum and Art Gallery, where I am very, very lucky to work with a wonderful collection of modern and contemporary British art. And I just want to start by saying a very big thank you to Art UK for inviting me to give this talk today as part of the Art Unlocked series. And a big thank you to everybody who is here listening to me right now. It's wonderful to see that so many people have come to hear me talk, so thank you. So a quick little introduction to me. My background is in art history, specialising in modern art and specifically the representation of women in art historical discourse. I work at Swindon Museum and Art Gallery as an engagement officer for a project called Art on Tour. And Art on Tour is all about taking Swindon's art collection outside of the museum walls and finding other ways to share it throughout the town. Which has been a big challenge during a pandemic, but we've been doing our very best to do that. And that's why the image on the screen is kind of showing an exhibition installation. So this is an exhibition we've got on at Steam Museum in Swindon at the moment, which combines our modern art collection with heritage collections from the Steam Museum of the Great Western Railway. So that's called Through the Window. So I thought I'd kind of start with that because it's representative of what I do, what I'm doing at Swindon Museum and Art Gallery at the moment. But today I'm going to talk to you about 6 paintings that I've selected from Swindon's art collection. And I've chosen paintings that I think kind of have beautiful stories woven around them, whether they're in relation to Swindon or just kind of British art in general, and kind of artists that I feel really contribute a lot to you know, significant things to British art, which was quite challenging because obviously in one way or another all the artworks from the collection do that. So I also chose pieces that really resonate with me in one way or another as well. So but firstly, I'm just going to, hopefully this works, flip you over to the next slide. So before I kind of launch into the artworks that I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to talk about a few of the figures who were really instrumental in starting the collection off. So it started in the 1940s, really, and it kind of began with the library service, really. Some of the first librarians, when the library service opened in 1943, were tasked with starting off an art collection in Swindon, and they were really ambitious about it and really determined that Swindon would have this wonderful collection of art. And so one of the images you're seeing here is of the staff at the Central Library in the 1960s, and the man in the middle of the front row there with the glasses on is Harold Jolliffe, who was, you know, kind of one of the first figures who was really instrumental in getting the collection together. And he got in touch with the other man, the man at the centre of the other picture on this screen, and that is Jimmy Bomford. And Bomford was a wealthy man based in Wiltshire who had kind of made his money in the London Stock Exchange and then moved to Wiltshire and kind of ran a farm here. And he was really enthusiastic about art and had a massive modern art collection. So Jolliffe and Jimmy kind of began conversations, and eventually that led to Jimmy Bomford giving a number of artworks to Swindon and really sowing the seeds of this wonderful art collection. So he gave works by the likes of Henry Moore and Graham Sutherland and Ben Nicholson, some really, you know, some artists who became really big names in modern British art. So kind of over the years, really, that the museum's been really lucky, or Swindon's been really lucky to have, you know, really generous people on side and really enthusiastic people on side to build up this wonderful collection. So we now have a modern and contemporary art collection, which kind of spans from like the 1800s right up until today. So, you know, kind of from the late 1800s, kind of, we're talking New English Art Club, the Camden Town Group, the Bloomsbury Group from the early 20th century, right through to kind of really important artists working today, like Grayson Perry and Maggie Hamling, who I'm going to talk about later on. So that's just a quick collection overview for you. There's so much more that I could say there, so many more people that I could bring into it, but I've got 30 minutes, so I'm going to go straight on to my selected paintings for today, which is what I'm here to talk to you about. So the first piece I've chosen, I've kind of chosen it for many reasons, really. It was one of the first artworks to enter Swindon's art collection, and it was donated by Jimmy Bomford, who I've just talked about. It was one of 22 pieces that he donated over the years, and not only did he donate this artwork to Swindon, but he also knew the artist Yankel Oldler pretty well. So he had provided him with a place to live and a studio here in Wiltshire in Old Bourne, and donated this piece of the collection. So I think that that's yeah, kind of a really nice connection, especially because Oldler wasn't, you know, originally from England. He was actually born in Poland in 1895, and he became very much a leading painter in the Dusseldorf art scene in the 1920s. So somebody who was very much influenced by German expressionism and influenced a lot of young artists at that time. But unfortunately, in 1933, he was forced to leave Germany. He was faced with Nazi persecution because he was Polish, he was Jewish, and he was a modern abstract artist, which was something that was you know, really considered very un-German at the time as well. So he was condemned as a degenerate artist, and he a lot of his works were seized from public collections in Germany and shown in a big degenerate artist exhibition in 1937. So yeah, he had built up this incredible career, and then unfortunately had to leave, and he spent 6 or 7 years sort of traveling around Europe before eventually making his way to Britain. Hugely impacted post-war British art. He lived in Scotland for a while, and then moved down to London, where he met Jimmy Bomford. So I just think there's this just incredible story about an artist who, you know, had this terrifying journey, you know, from Nazi-occupied Germany to Wiltshire, where he met, well, to London, where he met Bomford, and then to Wiltshire. For this piece to kind of be in Swindon's collection and tell that story, I think is a really wonderful thing. So as you can see, it's a very melancholic piece of work. It's got this kind of anxiety about it. You can see the influence of German expressionism in this kind of emphasis on the emotion and the simplification of forms, the kind of almost angular forms. It shows a kind of skeletal figure, I suppose, sort of otherworldly skeletal figure, with what looks like kind of a paint palette. So it kind of reflects his experiences as an artist whose work was devalued, whose work was condemned, really, and whose life was ruined. You know, whose life in Germany was ruined by the Nazi occupation. He was actually one of 10 siblings, and he was the only one to survive who wasn't killed in the Holocaust. So, you know, there's a lot of emotion bound up with this little painting, and I just think it's extremely powerful. And I don't think, I kind of always like to think that your circle in the top of the painting also is a maybe just a little glimmer of hope, a little yellow circle, like a little glimmer of hope of a new life as he settled in Wiltshire after everything he'd been through. So that's my first painting, and I also just wanted to show it in situ here. So this is an installation from 2018, and you can kind of just see it toward the sort of maybe centre left there, and you can see how small that piece is and how small but impactful it is, and it really it does pack a punch. I think, you know, it's like this small little kind of, you know, this quietly devastating, haunting painting, I suppose I would say. So yes, that's my first painting. I just want to say as well, I should have said at the beginning, obviously there is a Q&A, so you know, there's a Q&A box there, so any questions that you have as I'm going along, please do pop them in there, and I'll do my very best to answer them at the end of my talk. So the second piece I wanted to discuss is very different, again, very different from what I've just talked about. It's called Girl Selling Flowers by Desmond Morris, painted not long after, though, in 1946, so we're still in the 40s. Again, Morris was another artist who knew Jimmy Bomford quite well, actually, being a Swindon lad himself, who was born in Wiltshire and grew up in Swindon. And he met Bomford when he was still quite a young artist, and Bomford it was really interesting actually, because Desmond Morris, he's in his 90s now, but he gave a talk to the Friends of Swindon Museum and Art Gallery a while ago that was just wonderful earlier on this year, and he described how Bomford was this incredibly generous person who would loan him paintings to, you know, show to his art classes that he taught, and I just thought that was a wonderful thing to hear. But Desmond Morris, sorry, going back to that, Desmond Morris was, as I said, he moved to Swindon in the 30s, in 1933, grew up here, and as a teenager, well, I should also say actually that you know, Desmond Morris is probably best known as a broadcaster, perhaps, and also a zoologist. He's really, you know, he's probably most famous for his book, The Naked Ape. But he's also, you know, a really talented surrealist painter, brilliant surrealist painter. He's been working for years. This piece was painted when he was 18 years old, and he's in his 90s now and still painting every single day. So he's just, you know, he's a real force, really. So yeah, this piece I think is really special because it depicts another famous Swindonian, Diana Dawes. And the two met as teenagers, and again, in the talk that he gave, he sort of spoke as really affectionately of his time with Diana Dawes, and when they were kind of teenagers, going out, kind of boyfriend and girlfriend in Swindon at this time, and how she would teach him how to dance, and they would go to the movies together and all this sort of stuff. And I just think it's really shows this moment in time in which these two you know, young Swindonians came together before then actually separating to have brilliant careers as you know, really important public figures. So Diana Dawes, of course, would go on to become a very famous actress. In fact, in 1947, I think the year after this was painted, she starred in 3 movies, I think. So you know, she was just on the verge of going out and becoming something big at this time, and of course she would become known for her blonde hair and big red lips. So he's Morris, 18-year-old Desmond Morris has really captured that in this picture, and I think, you know, it's just got this incredible energy and vibrancy about it. I feel like he was just trying to capture this moment. this kind of noise in this moment of this time and place. In terms of its style, I think, you know, obviously it's a very, very early piece, so it's kind of removed from what we know, the kind of work that we know that Desmond Morris produces today and would go on to produce. But it kind of shows how, you know, as a teenager, he discovered surrealism. He discovered the surrealist artists who'd been creating work during World War I, and he was really struck by these rebel artists who were kind of, you know, driven to create these strange fantasy world at a time of great brutality. And I think maybe growing up during World War II, you know, and discovering surrealism, he began to take on, you know, his work began to kind of develop these biomorphic forms and these kind of strange patterns and shapes. So you can kind of just see the seeds of that surrealism coming through in this early, very wonderful picture. And I did also want to, I think the next slide is a recent acquisition. Desmond Morris very kindly donated this piece to Swindon in 2018. Actually, not 2018, sorry, it was actually the last piece, I think, to enter the collection before we closed for lockdown last year. So it was made in 2018, so you can see the kind of work he's doing. That's why it's such a bad photograph, because, you know, it's it hasn't even been photographed properly yet, and, you know, we got it and then we had to lock down, unfortunately. So it's a picture that's been hastily but kindly taken by our lovely museum assistant there, as you can see. But I think it just sort of shows these kind of colourful, surreal figures that he's really known for now. But I'm keeping an eye on the time. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at keeping an eye on the time when I'm talking. So I'm going to move swiftly on to another piece that I love from Swindon's collection. Very different again. For me, it's calm, it's meditative, and it's by an artist who just doesn't get given enough credit. It's by Helen Lesueur. Lesueur ran the Beaux Arts Gallery from 1951 to 1965, I think. And she was so influential to introducing these, you know, so many brilliant artists, mostly figurative artists, to the British art scene at a time when it wasn't necessarily trendy to do so. So talking about people like Leon Kossoff, Frank Auerbach, Lucian Freud. I'm trying to think of artists who are also in Swindon's collection. So yeah, she had this real taste for figurative art that was kind of painterly and unpolished. So I don't think she really gets enough credit for doing that work to nourish the talent of those people, those artists. And of course, she was a brilliant artist herself as well. And this is a piece that's just always resonated with me from the collection, because I just look at it and I just feel you know, I just feel quite peaceful when I look at it, I think. It was painted after the Beaux Arts Gallery closed down, of course, at a time where she had more, you know, this moment where she had more time to focus on her own work, which she hadn't really been able to do up until that point. And it's yeah, she described that you know, she'd walked into this room and was just so struck by the light within it. And I do really think that it shows her talent for capturing you know, a space with incredible atmosphere, and for capturing this sense of light just flooding through a window, and us kind of walking through this door into this incredibly inviting space. And formally, it's a beautiful piece, the way these kind of golden yellows lead our eye around the painting. So yes, I think there's something very, very special about it. A bit of debate about what it actually depicts. According to our records, it's the studio of her son, John Lesueur, who also went on to become a quite well-known figurative artist. Recent correspondence with John Lesueur himself revealed that actually perhaps it might not be the case. It might not have been his studio after all. So there's a bit of debate about that. But in actual fact, I don't think that Helen Lesueur would have minded that too much, because I think for her it was all about this formality, the formality of the work, the light of the work. But yes, it's a unique piece for her, I think, because a lot of her work is populated with people, with single people or groups of people. So it's interesting to kind of see this very quiet space from her. And I really want to do more research into Lesueur, actually, but I haven't really had time. So if anybody has any thoughts on her, like, please do share them. Like, I'd love to hear them. But I better skip on to my next slide now. Always feeling very, very aware of time, but as I said, if I've missed anything or anything like that, just I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. So skipping forward to the 80s, this piece, again, I've chosen it for really slightly personal reasons. It's a piece that I was one of the first pieces I think I ever saw from the Swindon's collection. So I always very much, sorry, can you bear with me one sec? Sorry, noise from beyond, the joys of working from home. Yeah, so I've chosen this for a very personal reason. As a child seeing this, I was kind of terrified by it. It was one of the first pieces that I saw from the collection. And, I think I found it morbid, and I found that, it's on such a large scale. It's like over 1.5 meters high, and this subject matter on this scale, it packs a real punch. But I never ever forgot it, and I think that working with the collection now, it's kind of one of my favorite pieces, because I love the fact that Maggie Hamling really uses paint in a way that's just teeming with life, and she doesn't shy away from addressing these difficult subject matter and being confrontational with it, and really exploring the human condition through this kind of subject matter. And I think this piece really, really reflects all of these things. And it was painted at a time when Hamling was becoming really quite, was becoming a public figure, I suppose. She was the first artist to become an artist of residence at the National Gallery in London in 1980, and she was becoming a kind of public figure on, I think it was a Channel 4 art quiz show at the time as well. So, she was getting quite big at this time, and so I kind of love the fact that this piece at this moment in her career, is in the collection. And it was painted after she took a trip to Barcelona and began kind of painting pictures of bullfights, and she was really interested in this kind of a juxtaposition, I suppose, between power and fragility, and this idea of this kind of very powerful animal entering the bull ring, very proud and very powerful, and kind of becoming weakened and humiliated. So it's kind of about that, about the kind of stages of the bull kind of transforming from this powerful animal to being kind of tormented and eventually struck down. And I think it's a really beautiful comment on the brutish side of human nature, which I think resonates more today than ever before in this moment where we're kind of questioning our relationship with the planet and with the other beings that inhabit it. So I think it's a real timeless comment on the human condition and brutality. And I wanted to show you this close-up of the painting as well, because I think it's so hard to kind of appreciate, you know, the quality of the paint in a slide. But I think that what I've always loved about Hamling and the way she paints, and why I think she's so influential and brilliant at what she does, is because she applies a paint in a way that feels like the surface is moving, like it's writhing, and it really contributes to this kind of moment of suspended action, of dynamism within the piece, and it just makes the canvas feel incredibly alive. And that's part of the reason why her paintings pack such a punch. Yeah, so yeah, this piece always very much sticks with me. And as you know, Maggie Hamling, she's still, she is just, you know, a real force to be reckoned with. So I did want to highlight that one today. Now, the next piece I chose is by Eileen Cooper. And I chose this piece for several reasons, really. You know, again, personal taste, I love Eileen Cooper's work. I think, you know, I really can get absorbed into her work. It's kind of, I think that the colours are beautiful. I think that, you know, she's a beautiful storyteller. But also, you know, I think Swindon Museum and Art Galleries had a lovely relationship with Eileen Cooper over the years. We were the first public collection to acquire a piece by Eileen Cooper. And of course, she would go on to be the first female keeper of the Royal Academy, which, you know, is, you know, no small thing, considering the Royal Academy opened in 1768, and then it took until the year, I think it was 2010, that Eileen Cooper, I think I'm right about that Eileen Cooper became the keeper of the Royal Academy, which essentially gave her, you know, responsibility for the Royal Academy schools. So, you know, the fact that, you know, a female was finally given this position, and that it was a woman artist whose work is so kind of centered around her experiences as a woman. So a lot of her work kind of comes from, you know, it comes from a very personal place, I think. But it also kind of has this universal kind of this universal, I don't know, like I just feel like, you know, anybody, like I myself, though they're very personal for her, they you know, people can kind of there's space there for your own experiences and your own thoughts and your own feelings. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now. So Play Dead 2 is what this piece is called, and it entered the collection, I think, in 2017, after we had a retrospective exhibition of Eileen Cooper's drawings at Swindon Museum and Art Gallery, and it depicts two figures kind of in this very kind of tumultuous landscape, covering their face, covering their bodies, and it's a really highly emotive piece. Again, you know, we've kind of got this swirling sky, this bending tree, this swirling shape on the ground, which is just this great kind of intense force of energy within the piece, and, you know, two figures that, you know, kind of look quite emotional. And again, I sort of think that, you know, anybody who's been in an emotional situation with another person could relate to a narrative like this. But Cooper, when I asked her about it, had sort of said it was about her son learning about the concept of death, and about her trying to kind of help him through that. So yeah, it's a very emotional piece of work, and stylistically, I love it. I think it demonstrates Eileen Cooper's, you know, really bold approach to painting. I love her. She's got this real way of creating these very stylized figures through a bold sense of line, and they kind of just have this this real kind of monumentality about them. And I think on the next slide, I've also got Separate Ways, which is the first piece that was acquired into the collection. Again, it's a really, really large piece, a really large charcoal drawing, and you can really see how she uses line to great effect to create these really, really monumental figures. So yeah, I think as I said, this was the first piece by Eileen Cooper to enter a public collection, and I feel quite proud about that on Swindon's behalf, really. It was also acquired under the advice of Richard Morfitt as well, who was the keeper of the modern collection at the Tate at the time, who helped to develop the collection. So so that's really a lovely connection as well. And the other image on this slide is called Hide and Seek, and that was the exhibition that we had in 2016. Sorry, I think I said 2017 earlier, but 2016. And then I think in 2017 the picture was the painting was acquired. So yeah, just that was a great show. So I just wanted the opportunity to highlight that a little bit as well. The final piece I wanted to talk about today, and I feel very much like this is a really quick run through, and I find it hard not to just kind of go on and on and on about things. So I'm trying very, very hard to keep to time. So this piece is called Subway, by an artist called Nicholas Middleton, and I've chosen this because it's just an extraordinary piece of painting. You might have noticed that I tend to veer toward the very kind of emotive side of things, but this is just a very different style, and it kind of almost gets us up to date with some of the more recent acquisitions in the collection as well. It's not the most recent acquisition. The Desmond Morris piece that I showed you earlier on was the most recent acquisition, but this one was part of a very large acquisition, a large donation of works into the collection, which happened in 2013. So it was from the Contemporary Art Society, who which is a group of an artist-led group, sorry, I should say, and they donated 40 works of art by 24 leading painters across the UK. So this was a really, really brilliant acquisition, a really important acquisition, I think, which kind of really showed the breadth of painting practice, and how, you know, it continues to expand and it continues to evolve. And, you know, I could have chosen any of those pieces to talk about, but of course I've chosen this piece because I think it's interesting that Nicholas Middleton engages so much with the kind of nature of the photographic image, and I guess the kind of post-photographic age in which we're living, and this very digital age, the age of the digital image, and how we so quickly engage with imagery, you know, through digital media, and how quickly it's then forgotten. So what he's doing with this piece is he's using this very photorealist painting style to draw our attention to an image that's, I guess, quite unsightly and quite throwaway normally. And what I love about it is it does really look so much like a photograph that you find yourself desperately trying to unravel it, and desperately trying, you know, to kind of almost reveal the trick. I think, you know, you're looking at it thinking, you know, where are the telltale signs to show me that this has been done by an artist's hand. So you kind of spend a lot of time with this painting, sort of trying to unravel the idea of the photograph and understand it as a painting. And so we wind up spending a lot of time meditating over it, and I think that's really what I love it, and the kind of process that Middleton goes through to create these images is really interesting as well, because he'll take a photograph of a scene on a film camera and then develop it, and and then square up a canvas and then paint the scenes. So he's got this complete control over the process, this continuous control over the process. And it means that he himself spends a lot of time with a potentially kind of throwaway image, an image that we might otherwise ignore, this image of urban ruin, of something that was built to be useful, that was built to be practical, becoming essentially derelict. So, and you know, not having that purpose anymore. So I think for me, that the fact that he spends so much time on this scene, and he also forces us to spend so much time on this scene, is you know, it's interesting, and I think it alludes to the way in which we are so easy to dismiss what could be very much worthy of our attention. And I love that Robert Prizeman, one of the founders of the Contemporary British Painting Group, described Middleton's work as the poetry of the mundane. And I think that that's just a perfect way to summarize it. And I think that Middleton really alludes to the continued importance of painting in a world of fast imagery, of constantly moving imagery, and he shows how painting can adapt, and how artists respond to the times in which they're living, in which they're working, and how painting can be, you know, continuously used to comment on the way that we're consuming the world, and so that's what I really love about this piece. I'm going to end there because I know I've gone over time, and I'm really sorry about that. So I hope that I've answered your questions, and I hope that you've enjoyed the talk. And yeah, I hope that you follow Art on Tour and find out more about what we're doing, and get to see some of Swindon's collection as well. But yeah, I'll end things there.